Denver, winter 1998. Mile High Stadium was more than a playing field, it was a sanctuary of faith. On a canvas of white snow, number 30 in the orange uniform tore through the defensive line like an arrow of destiny. Terrell Davis, a hero not born for fame, but forged for victory. In less than 5 years, he lifted the Denver Broncos from a team of disappointment to an American icon. In 1997, he helped the Broncos win their first-ever Lombardi trophy, scoring 3 touchdowns in Super Bowl XLX and earning the game's MVP honors. In the 1998 season, he reached the 2,008-yard milestone, a feat only the superhuman achieve, and claimed the NFL MVP title. 2 consecutive championships, millions of fans chanting, the press dubbing him the Mile High Messiah, the savior of Denver. From a 6th-round draft pick, an unknown, Terrell Davis became the soul of the Broncos, the embodiment of American will and spirit, a man who turned doubt into miracles, prejudice into glory. Every Sunday, 76,000 spectators rose as he raised his hand in the mile-high salute, their roars echoing like a prayer of gratitude for a living legend. But behind the roar of 76,000 fans was a cry of pain only he could hear. 2 knees with torn ligaments, worn cartilage, pain like a blade slicing with every step. But beneath the roar of 76,000 fans, his knees screamed louder. After each game, he sat silently in the locker room, unwrapping bandages, watching blood seep through white gauze, retching from pain and exhaustion. Every trip down the tunnel felt like walking through a field of thorns made of his own body. All of America saw him smile, but no one saw the nights he couldn't sleep, his knees burning like fire. He knew his body was betraying him, but his will refused to let him stop. Pain is temporary, he once said, but legacy is forever. He didn't run just to win, but to prove to himself that the kid who grew up in poverty, enduring screams and crippling migraines, could rewrite his fate. Every yard he ran was a prayer, every collision a testament that human will is stronger than bone. Terrell Davis burned his body for Denver's glory, and from those ashes, a legend was born. San Diego, early 1980s. The city had 2 faces, one of sunshine and blue seas, the other of neighborhoods where police cruised nightly like a ritual. The Davis family lived on the other side of the map, where police sirens blended with the neighbor's TV, where kids learned to duck rubber bullets before they learned to spell. A small house, peeling paint, 6 boys crammed into 2 bedrooms. Their father, Joe, was once a strong man, but war, alcohol, and life crushed him. He brought home wordless rage, days of absence, and nights of storms. When he was home, the house was taut as a bowstring. One wrong word, one misplaced glance, could send a glass shattering against the wall. Their mother, Katri, was the only force against that tempest, a night shift nurse with calloused hands from tending patients all day, yet still holding her children and shielding them from her husband's fury. She had no time to sleep, but she had faith, a weary faith that God would see and forgive all. Terrell was the youngest, the smallest, the quietest. He'd hide behind the bedroom door, hearing his father's shouts, his mother's sobs in the kitchen, his brother's failed attempts to intervene. Night after night, flashing lights, shadows moving like a nightmare, and in it all, the boy sat still, hands clutching his head, waiting for his father's footsteps to leave. Then, one morning like any other, as the sun rose, the first migraine hit. No cause, no warning, just light stabbing his skull like a burning knife. Every sound became a hammer pounding his temples. The 7-year-old collapsed, sobbing not from fear, but from not understanding what was happening to his body. His mother rushed to him, her cold hand on his forehead, whispering prayers. No medicine, no doctor, no missing school, just her words. Endure, son. God is testing you. And so he endured. The migraines lasted hours, sometimes days, eyes shut tight, lips purple, every sliver of light through the window an agony. He learned to hide the pain. At school, when his head felt like it would split, he still played, still ran, still faked a smile. No one knew, no one noticed. In that neighborhood, people had too many worries to care about a boy clutching his head. He learned life's first lesson in the world of the poor: pain isn't allowed to cry out. If you cry, you're left behind. If you stop, you're swallowed. When his father raged, Terrell slipped out back, staring at San Diego's smoky sky, promising himself he'd run far, far enough that no one could hurt him again. But the outside world wasn't much kinder. In that neighborhood, survival came before dreams. Walking to school, Terrell passed alleys littered with broken bottles, tired faces, and old sayings. "No one gets out of here, kid." He didn't reply. He clenched his fists, thinking of his mother, the woman who worked nights in a worn nurse's uniform, eyes shadowed but still smiling at her sleeping kids. She never said, "I'm proud of you," but her eyes told Terrell what she hoped, that one of her boys would escape this place. He decided it would be him, not through brilliance, not through luck, but through the only thing he had: endurance. Before football, Terrell learned to take hits and stand up. He learned that to survive a world of storms, you don't need to speak, you just need to stay silent and refuse to fall. The migraines, the shouts, the sleepless nights taught him a lesson he'd carry forever. If the world wants to silence you, use that silence to forge yourself into steel. And when football entered his life, it wasn't a game, it was a chance for a poor kid, buried in chaos, to find the only way to shout at the world, "I'm still here." At Lincoln High, Terrell Davis wasn't a name that drew cheers. He lacked the ideal height, the bulging muscles, the confident gaze of high school stars promised college scholarships. When the team lineup was announced, familiar names rang out, then silence. No one called Davis. No one glanced back at him. He stood there, sweat dripping down his neck, gripping his helmet, hiding the small shame only he felt. In the teenage world of imagined strength, not being called hurt more than any fall. At Lincoln, he wasn't a future star, he was a substitute, the backup to the backup. But what no one saw was the resolve inside. The kid raised in storms was used to being overlooked. Every morning, he arrived earlier, ran extra laps, lifted extra weight, not to prove himself to the coach, but to himself. "If they don't see me, I'll make the ground remember my footsteps." After graduation, college doors didn't fling open as they did for other players. Long Beach State was his only shot. A mid-tier football program no one really cared about. But for Terrell, it was his first small dream. He packed his faith and left, thinking hard work would carry him out of the old neighborhood. Then one morning, a cold notice appeared on the school's bulletin board. Football program terminated due to budget cuts. A few words and years of dreams dissolved like smoke. No apologies, no solutions. Just a closed door, leaving a young man frozen in his dorm room, staring at his football helmet on the desk, realizing his efforts had been erased by a decision made far away. Once again, he was left on the sidelines. Unwilling to surrender, Davis applied to transfer to the University of Georgia, where football was a religion, where giants were hailed like kings. But there, he was just a lost rookie. Georgia had its stars. They looked at him with pity and disdain. A transfer from a defunct program, with no notable stats. He was a bench warmer, practicing harder than anyone. But when game time came, the coach called someone else. Teammates nicknamed him the Ghost, always at practice, never on the stat sheet. Every run he made ended in silence. Every game he sat on the bench, watching others celebrated, his throat tight. "I kept running," he once said, "and no one saw." Some nights he'd slip out to the field after everyone left, running in the dark, until his legs nearly gave out. No one saw, no one clapped, no one praised. But in those nights, a different kind of will was forged, one only the forgotten understand. Then came 1995, the NFL Draft, a day when America watched young talents get called, where dreams of hundreds of young men came true. Terrell Davis sat in a small room with his mom and a few relatives. They turned on the TV, eager to hear Terrell Davis, University of Georgia. Round 1 passed, nothing. Round 2, nothing. Rounds 3, 4, 5, no mention. Each time another name was called, his mother squeezed his hand, forcing a smile. Then in round 6, pick 196, Denver Broncos. The announcer read his name quickly. No highlight, no video, no stats. The broadcast cut to a beer commercial. On TV, the biggest moment of his life was skipped like a glitch. When the show ended, his mother asked softly, "So, You really got picked." He nodded, tried to smile, but tears welled up, unsure if from joy or humiliation. Even my dream, he thought, didn't get a frame. That was the day the world told him he didn't matter. But for Davis, that silence became fuel. When he signed his rookie contract with the Broncos, there were no reporters, no flowers, no cameras, just him, a thin contract, and a small blurb in the local paper's back page. But inside, he knew, if the world doesn't see me, I'll make them remember my pain. The pain from childhood, from migraines, from the cramped house, from every time he was overlooked. It would all fuel an energy no defensive line could stop. When he donned Denver's orange jersey, he didn't just carry his dream, but the vow of an invisible kid. I'll make them see me, even if I have to burn my body to do it. The Denver Broncos training camp in the summer of 1995 was where more dreams were crushed than born. The sun scorched the skin, the air thick with the smell of sweat and iron, the sound of collisions ringing like a hammer on steel. Among the young players fighting for a spot, a smaller, less noticed rookie threw himself into every tackle as if battling his own memories. "He runs like he's running from his past," a coach whispered. Indeed, Terrell Davis didn't run just to score. He ran to escape poverty, the screams, the cramped San Diego house, the years of being invisible. He ran with the pain of his childhood, with a hunger to be seen. And in an environment where even the strongest broke bones, that will made him different. His first collision stunned teammates. This rookie charged straight into defenders 20 kilos heavier without hesitation. He fell, got up and charged again. Slowly, the team began to whisper, "That kid's got something crazy." In 1996, Davis became the Broncos' cornerstone. Every yard he gained was a new scratch on his body. Every fall sent pain from his knees to his heart, but he didn't stop. In the gym, he told his coach, "Pain's fine, just don't let me be invisible again." In 1997, Denver embarked on a historic journey. The entire city lived on Davis's breath. The man who ran through defenses like he ran through fate. He didn't just score, he brought hope. At Super Bowl XX12, against the Green Bay Packers, a migraine tormented him to near blindness in one eye. When Coach Mike Shanahan asked, "Can you play?" he replied, "If I can stand, I can run." And run he did. 157 yards, 3 touchdowns. Denver won. The city erupted. He was named the game's MVP, standing amid a sea of people, flashbulbs all around. But that night, in the locker room, as others hugged and cheered, Terrell sat alone. He unwrapped the bandages from his knees, watching blood seep through layers of gauze. He didn't hear the music, only his heartbeat pulsing with the pain. The world saw trophies. He saw the bill. The world saw victory. He saw the toll his body paid. In the 1998 season, Terrell Davis became a storm. He ran 2,008 yards, a number only a handful in NFL history have reached. He was voted the league's MVP. The Broncos won another championship. The press called him the perfect machine, the immortal warrior. But with every game, every step, his knee cartilage wore down, his ligaments tore further. Doctors warned, "Keep going, and you'll live with pain for life." He just smiled. "I've lived with it since I was a kid." After victories, fans celebrated all night. Fireworks lit the sky. Thousands flooded the streets. But below the stadium, alone in the bathroom, Terrell leaned against the wall, unwrapping bandages, watching blood swirl in the water. The pain made him retch, his knees swollen like they were burning. Every attempt to straighten his leg made his body tremble. In that moment, he understood glory and pain were inseparable. Outsiders saw only the light, only he knew that light came from a fire consuming his body. But Davis didn't back down. He faced the cameras with a smile, gave thanks, raised the Lombardi trophy high. He knew Denver needed to see their idol strong. His smile became a symbol of hope, but behind it was a brutal truth. Every game was a crucifixion. Every night, he soaked his feet in ice, until numb. Some mornings he couldn't get out of bed without help. Yet when the whistle blew, he charged like pain didn't exist. "He plays with borrowed time," a reporter wrote, as if every carry could be his last. When the Broncos won their second championship, they called him a legend, the hero who pulled the city from darkness. But to him, it wasn't victory. it was a trade. A brutal trade. Blood for glory, bones for light. After the victory parade, in the quiet hotel room, Terrell looked at his bandaged legs, holding a small trophy, wondering, how much longer can I go? Outside, thousands still chanted his name, but in that dark room, he heard only one sound, the creak of his knees, a reminder that every miracle has a price. And for Terrell Davis, that price was his body. In the fall of 1999, fate finally caught up. The game between the Denver Broncos and New York Jets had just begun when the unthinkable happened. A routine block, a misplaced step on the turf, and a dry snap, like a branch breaking in a silent forest. In that moment, the packed stadium fell quiet. The cheers stopped, the drums paused, the air seemed drained. On the grass, Terrell Davis lay still, eyes wide, staring at the sky, as if trying to hear if his heart was still beating. He didn't need a doctor to tell him, he knew. As teammates knelt around the stretcher, he whispered to his coach, "I heard it break." No one replied. They just placed hands on his shoulder, as the stands roared with sympathetic applause. For the first time in his career, he couldn't stand. The surgery lasted over 4 hours. The doctor said every ligament was torn. His right knee, once the foundation of thousands of bursts, was now rubble. In the days after, he lived with pain so intense it erased time. He woke at night, drenched in sweat, dreaming he was breaking through defenses, only to jolt awake as his knee throbbed. Physical therapy was hell. Each morning he leaned on crutches, counting steps. His body no longer obeyed. What was once strongest now betrayed him. The worst feeling wasn't pain, it was helplessness. I used to own the field, he thought, and now I can't own my legs. While he relearned to walk, TV replayed old highlights, the breakaways, the mile-high salute, the glorious victories. Fans still cheered when his name flashed on screens, still called him a legend. But for Davis, each replay was a cut. They're cheering for a ghost, he thought. His body was no longer the one in the videos. He was a shadow of himself, a man trapped in the glorious image of his past. As the team played on without him, Davis tried returning to practice. He taped his knees, tried running a few steps. Each step sent a jolt up his spine. He fell, got up, fell again, got up. Not to prove anything to the team, but to not forget the feeling of running. But finally his body refused. One day, trying to climb stairs to the gym, his knee buckled, and he sat, clutching the railing, gasping. Tears fell without him noticing. Doctors urged rest, but what was rest to a man who only knew forward? He spent months grappling with the truth that his dream was over. No grand moment signaled it, no lavish farewell, just a quiet afternoon, watching young players run across the practice field, realizing he was an outsider. In his darkest days he asked, "If I don't run, who am I?" Everything he believed in, strength, speed, will, was now just memory. He didn't know how to live without fans, teammates, or the opening whistle. In his quiet house, amid medals and mementos, he sat for hours staring at his bandaged legs, syringes lined up on the table, empty painkiller bottles. Outside winter returned, snow blanketing the field, and he heard only the wind whistling through the window, carrying faint echoes of the stands that once called his name. Some nights he hobbled to the mirror, staring at the man looking back, gaunt cheeks, sunken eyes. He whispered to himself, "This is the price," not with resentment, but as fact. The price of glory, of turning his body into a tool for millions' joy. And as he turned off the light, darkness swallowing the room, he knew the brightest chapter of his life was closed. No cheers, no songs to send him off, just the heavy silence of a hero betrayed by his own body, sitting in the dark, listening to the clock tick, each second counting down to when he'd have to learn to live in a world no longer meant for him. After leaving the field, Terrell Davis thought silence would be a reward, but silence for him turned out to be another punishment. No more crowd roars, no more clashing helmets, no more adrenaline coursing through his body, only endless mornings and sleepless nights, where the ticking clock sounded like a cruel reminder that his time was over. He stepped out of the world he once mastered, only to fall into a cold void, no longer called by name, no practice schedules, no reason to wake early. His body still bore an athlete's shape, but inside was decay. Every step still stung, his knees still swelled, but what hurt more was the hollow soul. He once thought, if I don't have the field, am I still anyone? In those dark days, Tamiko Nash entered his life, gently, patiently, but resolutely. She didn't see a legend, she saw a man who needed healing. When he withdrew, avoiding crowds, she didn't push, she only whispered, "You're not just a player, you're a father, a husband, a son." And those roles are still here. Those words, simple yet powerful, were like a hand pulling him from an invisible abyss. She taught him that a person's worth isn't in the cheers, but in those who stand by when the lights go out. Then came the children, Jackson, Miles, and little Dylan. From the moment he held them, something in him shifted. Each cry, each laugh was medicine for his soul. When he first heard Dad, every stadium in his life vanished, leaving only a small house, soft light, and his kids' laughter. He began living for simple things, waking early to make breakfast, driving them to school, watching movies on rainy nights. With Tamiko, he was no longer the mile-high messiah, he was just a man who learned to smile again after years of wearing endurance. And in those moments he learned to love himself again, not the hero on the field, but the man off it. In 2017, when Terrell Davis's name was called for the Hall of Fame, he sat in silence. For years, he thought that moment would be the final peak, but when it came, his heart only tightened. At the ceremony, he wore the immortal gold jacket, his legs trembling, not from nerves, but from knees that still ached. Stepping onto the stage, blinding lights hit his face, reflecting wrinkles of time and pain that never left. But his voice was warm, soft, full of gratitude. He didn't speak of titles, yards, or trophies. He named his mother, "My mom, Kateri." She was the real hero. He spoke of her night shifts as a nurse, her trembling hand on his forehead during migraines. His voice broke. "She kept me alive long enough to dream." He thanked his brothers, who taught him to stand tall in storms. He thanked Tamiko, who reminded him life could still be warm without stands. Then, looking at his 3 kids holding hands in the front row, he smiled through tears. "You're why I'm here." The room stood, applause unending. But that moment wasn't public adoration. It was his own forgiveness of the past. After the ceremony, when the lights dimmed, Terrell sat alone backstage. The gold jacket lay neatly on the chair beside him, his shins swollen, aching too much to move. He looked around the empty room, hours earlier filled with laughter, and realized, no more stands, just home. And in that home, I found my soul again. Now each evening, when his kids' laughter fills the living room, he no longer needs a stadium. When Tamiko rests her hand on his shoulder, gentle like his mother's once was, he knows love, not fame, is the only medicine that can save a soul worn by darkness. And though physical pain lingers, though nights are restless with aching knees, he's no longer afraid. Because beside him are hearts beating in sync, and that for Terrell Davis is life's greatest victory. July 2024, a warm California afternoon, Terrell Davis, his wife, and 3 kids boarded a commercial flight, like any ordinary American family. He took the middle seat to watch his kids. They'd just finished a short vacation. His eldest Jackson had a sore throat, coughing dryly all morning. As the plane took off, the boy whimpered, "Dad, I need ice." Terrell pressed the call light, but it didn't work. He leaned over, gently touching a flight attendant's arm as she passed, just to ask for ice for his son. That touch, brief, without force, without a disrespectful word, sparked a nightmare. She flinched, turned, her face frozen. Within minutes, a radio crackled at the back of the cabin. When the plane landed, police were waiting. They boarded, speaking curtly, coldly. "Mr. Davis, come with us." He was confused. Tamiko stood, asking what was wrong, but got no answer. 2 officers approached, telling him to stand. He complied. No resistance. One said, "You've been accused of assaulting a flight attendant." The words stabbed his chest. He shook his head. "No, I just touched her lightly to ask for ice for my son." No one listened. Then came the click, metal locking his wrists. The cabin went silent. Passengers looked away. His 3 kids sat frozen. Dylan, his youngest, burst into tears. Jackson trembled, screaming, "Dad, I'm sorry." Tamiko sobbed, voice breaking, My kids just saw their father treated like a criminal. They led him down the narrow aisle, his head brushing the ceiling. He didn't resist, only whispering to his wife, "Take them home." At the cabin's end, he looked back, seeing 3 small faces wet with tears, his daughter's hands reaching out in vain. No words could erase that image from memory. "I didn't fight," he told a reporter later. "I couldn't. They were watching." He knew any reaction, a word, a glance, could be misread, and he couldn't let his kids see their father wrestle with police. Police held him in an airport waiting room for nearly an hour, then released him with no evidence, no apology, no explanation. Days later, the airline issued a statement, calling it a regrettable misunderstanding, but for Davis, misunderstanding couldn't wash away the stain of that moment, a stain not on his record, but in his heart. A man once cheered by 76,000, hailed as America's symbol of strength and courage, was treated as a threat over a touch. The story spread across media. Some defended him, others doubted, as if a Super Bowl legend could be a liar. But Davis didn't argue. He didn't go on TV, didn't write defenses. He stayed silent. Those close to him said he sat on the porch many nights, watching his kids sleep through the window, his hands still feeling the cold of metal. "He hasn't slept soundly since," Tamiko said. "He's afraid his kids will always remember that image. Their strong father dragged away while the crowd wouldn't meet his eyes." That humiliation wasn't just personal. It was a bitter reminder that even after bleeding for this country, giving his body to a sport seen as national pride, he could still be suspected, insulted, handcuffed, because of his skin and a misunderstanding. In a society that exalts American heroes, some heroes must watch themselves be humiliated without being allowed to resist. Davis understood that better than anyone. He wasn't angry, just sad, because he knew this wasn't just his story. It was America's long-standing wound. After the incident, the airline offered a reconciliation meeting, a public apology. He nodded but didn't go. "They can apologize," he said. But my kids still saw. No one could return Dylan's terrified eyes, Jackson's choked sobs, or Tamiko's trembling hand. That invisible scar would follow him forever. He'd had broken knees, surgeries, months of therapy, but no wound left him as empty as that day. The next day, he posted one line on social media: "I've carried teams on my back, but yesterday, I couldn't even carry my own dignity." He'd carried teams, turned pain into legend, but that day, he couldn't hold his dignity. And America, the country that called him an icon, saw itself in the shattered mirror of its hero, a society that can lift you with glory, then crush you with prejudice. His story didn't end in anger, but in silence, the heaviest silence, when a hero must relearn to live in a world that hasn't learned to respect humanity. Now at 52, Terrell Davis's mornings begin in silence. He no longer wakes to practice alarms or roaring crowds. He wakes to pain. His right knee, which once carried Denver, stiffens each night. His shoulders ache when he moves. His eyes blur from years under stadium lights and endless painkillers. Every morning, he needs nearly an hour of therapy just to walk normally. Each step is a memory, each stumble a reminder that glory has its price. No more stadium spotlights, no cameras, just daylight through curtains and his kids' laughter outside. In his small California home, he lives slowly, tends plants, brews coffee, watches his 3 kids play, running on grass, their legs strong, free, innocent. When they fall, he rushes over, lifts them, always saying, "It's okay, you can get up." Perhaps he's speaking to himself. Now, no one calls him the mile-high Messiah. He's just a father limping slightly, a husband who sometimes pauses mid-dinner from pain. But in those slow steps is history. A man who made a city believe in miracles. The man who made America cry with joy, now makes it bow in empathy. A reporter once asked, "Do you regret trading your health for football?" He smiled, voice raspy. "No, I only regret that America forgets too quickly." America loves its heroes young, he said, and forgets them old. America loves its vibrant, powerful heroes, but forgets them when the lights dim, when cheers fade. People like Davis traded health, happiness, sometimes dignity, for the nation's moments of joy. for games that sparked American pride. But when they can't run, can't entertain, they're left in silence, with metal knees, painkillers, and memories that burn like unhealed wounds. On a shelf in Davis's living room, the Hall of Fame gold jacket hangs beside a bag of meds and a family photo. The gold glints, reflecting Tamiko and the 3 kids in the frame. To others, it's a symbol of immortality. To Davis, it's a reminder, everything eternal has limits. He no longer dreams of stages or fame. "I don't need money," he said in a recent interview. "I just want my kids to grow up in a country that respects people, not for fame, but because they're human." Sometimes, neighbors recognize him, rushing for autographs. He smiles, signs slowly, then returns to the sofa, icing his knee. To many that simple life might seem dull, but for Davis, it's a miracle. He knows other heroes didn't reach this age, lost to addiction, depression or pain. He's still here, breathing, loving, teaching his kids to laugh. For him each morning isn't routine, it's a victory. At night, he often sits alone in the living room, replaying old tapes. On the screen is 1998's him, young, strong, eyes bright, running like nothing could stop him. He doesn't watch to reminisce, but to remember that the man in the tape and the one here are two versions of the same soul. A soul that burned for faith and still lives to remind others that light never fades. His voice grows low and philosophical. His story isn't just an athlete's, it's a mirror for a nation. If America takes pride in people like Terrell Davis, it must also take responsibility when they're forgotten, humiliated, hurt. "You can't chant their names when they score, then turn away when they fall," he once said. "Don't cheer for glory if you're not ready to face the pain that comes with it." And that's his true legacy, not the yards, not the rings, but a lesson in resilience and dignity. He teaches his kids, and America, that a person isn't defined by their victories, but by how they rise after being brought to their knees. If you cheered for Terrell Davis, if you cried when he raised the championship trophy, give him the one thing he asks: respect. Remember that behind every legendary run was a body tearing apart, and behind every smile was a soul that endured more than we imagine. Don't forget, the true legacy isn't yards or victories, but how a person faces defeat and still chooses to love life. When the final lights go out, when the stand's empty, when titles are just words on paper, a man still limps onto his porch, watches his kids laugh, and smiles back. Because in the end, behind every scar, every limp and every silent night, Terrell Davis reminds America that greatness is not the absence of pain, it is the courage to carry it. There's a distinctly American sadness in Terrell Davis's story. It's not just in the shattered knee of 1999, when the dry crack rang out and the stadium fell silent as if swallowed whole, the moment he knew his career ended while his peak was still unfinished. It's not just in the scene of him sitting alone in the bathroom, after Super Bowl XXX, unwrapping his knee bandages and watching blood seep through white gauze while all of Denver celebrated the victory, calling him the mile-high Messiah. The real sadness is that a man who gave his body for America's joy must live the rest of his life in pain, enduring physical therapy each morning just to walk, and ultimately, still be handcuffed in front of his 3 children for asking for ice for his sore-throated son. That's no longer about sports, that's about dignity, and that's what should make us as a society feel ashamed. Terrell Davis did everything Americans say we honor. He grew up in poverty, in domestic violence, with migraines from age 7. He was overlooked at Long Beach State, seen as a ghost at Georgia, picked 196th as if he were spare. He rose above, rushing for 2,008 yards in a season, becoming NFL MVP, bringing 2 championships to Denver, something the city waited a lifetime to see. He proved Will can bend fate. And then America turned away too quickly. We love young heroes then abandon them when they no longer entertain us. We celebrate the moment he lifted the Lombardi trophy, but who was there when he had to watch his daughter cry, seeing her father treated like a criminal? The lesson is clear: respect can't just show up on Sundays, it must be there on Mondays, Tuesdays, and in the years after the lights go out. If we ever stood to shout his name, we owe it to stand for those like him, people who paid with blood, bones and their children's tears, just so we could have a moment to call pride. If Terrell Davis's story makes you believe that grit and compassion can still exist amid scars, leave a subscription to join us in telling more journeys like his. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video where we continue to honor those who rose from pain to remind America that dignity must never be forgotten.